This is the strategy that I use to go 25-4 in the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it in this video. Now make sure you stick to the end of this video because then I'm going to reveal exactly what website you need to use to be able to correlate the information that you learn. Alright, so let's go ahead and get through the first step here of what type of bet we're going to be looking at. There's a couple of them. Alright, so what we're going to be looking at is the alternate overs for QB passing yards, running back rushing yards, and wide receiver, obviously, receiving yards. So those are the bets that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the alternate overs. Okay? So what that means when I say alternate over, that means the line that you see when you log into your sportsbook, that's not the line that we're using. We're going to make our own line and tailor it to exactly what we want to give us the highest probability of winning. Number two, what we need to do is we need to find in each of these categories who has the most owned percentage across daily fantasy sports. Okay, so DFS is what it's called. DFS. We want to know who has them in their lineup. Who is the most popular quarterback, running back, wide receiver in the DFS lineups, okay, across the board. Now, what does that mean? That means daily fantasy is where you go and you implement one lineup. Okay, you usually pick a quarterback. You could pick 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, a defense. You put a fantasy lineup together, and that fantasy lineup goes up against other people. Not a sports book, but goes up against other people. And you need the data to know exactly where everybody's putting certain players in their lineup. So once you're able to find out exactly where they're putting all their people at in the lineups across the board, you can see who the top quarterback is, top running backs are, top receivers are that are owned across that span of all the people putting their lineups in for daily fantasy sports. Because daily fantasy sports is a whole nother sector where you literally can go up against other people with your lineup and their lineup, and whoever has the most fantasy points at the end of the day ends up winning. And you can also enter into tournaments where it's a broad aspect of things. You know, you can win $1 million for first place, but you're going against obviously like 1 million people. And if you have the best lineup on any given day, you have a chance to make a lot of money. But we're going to use that information to correlate us to alternate over props. Now, this is a very simple strategy. It's not hard whatsoever. There's not a lot of research that needs to go into it because it's really just a basic concept here. The basic concept is taking the top owned DFS fantasy players across the league on that Sunday and correlating them into props. So let's say, for example, our highest owned QB that we found is, let's say, Lamar Jackson. All right, we're going to say it's Lamar, and let's say his minus 110 passing yard line, let's say, is like 205. All right, usually it's something like that because he doesn't pass a crazy amount. All right, now let's go ahead and say his alternate line at minus 200 is 175. All right, now what do? This is our top owned quarterback. Now we need to correlate this with our probability chart to see exactly if we have a plus edge and if there's a way to find a plus edge in these players to be able to give us the highest probability. So now we're going to take Lamar Jackson, we're going to push him over here, and we're going to say that he is playing the 5th worst defense against the pass. All right, the 5th worst. So what we're going to do now is we're going to backtrack here. All right, we're going to see how he's done against these numbers, both of these numbers here. Okay, we're going to see how he's done against the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, and the worst. Okay, we're going to go and we're going to see exactly how he's done against similar defenses in this scenario. Once we have did that, we should come up with a number here of how many times he was able to go over 175 passing yards facing all these teams right here. How many times he was able to come over 205 facing these teams here. This is where your correlation comes into account. So let's go ahead and say now that for the minus 200 line at 175 plus, you did the research for similar defenses here, and he hit that number 4 out of 5 times. All right, so 80% of the time, he's hitting that number. 80% of the time, he's hitting over 175 plus. Let's take the odds that are minus 200, correlate implied probability with that, which is 66% implied probability at the minus 200 line, gives us a plus 14% edge. All right, so we have a plus 14% edge now at 175 plus. Now let's take the minus 110 line at 205. Now let's say at the 205 line, he was able to get 2 out of the 5 games that he played the similar defenses. That's going to give us 40% of the time with a correlation of what? The minus 110 line here, right? Which is 205, which is implied probability of 52%, thus giving us a negative 12% edge. Okay? Now it doesn't always work out this way. Might be a little bit closer than that, But this is the basic concept of what you're doing when you find your top quarterback, top running back, top receiver that's owned across daily fantasy lineups. Now, once you have that and you correlate it, like I just did with Lamar Jackson here, you would do with the top running back and you do with the top receiver. Now, if you guys love all these strategies that I teach you, but you just can't quite grasp the concept of the exact play that you want, all you gotta do is click the link in the description, because I post those in my group on my app every single day. So that way you guys can see and make sure that the strategies that you're learning are correlating with the right plays. Now let's go ahead and get to number 3 here, because once you're able to find your quarterback, receiver, and running back, and you're able to look at their alternate overs, you're able to find that plus edge, you should find, obviously, at least 3 plays there that are plus edge. So now, with the odds, depending on what the odds are, this is one of the biggest things that get, a lot of people do it the wrong way, and I'm going to teach you how to do it right here, okay, is actually placing that bet. So when you're going in and you're actually placing that bet, let's say this one's minus 200, let's say this one's minus 170, and let's say this one is minus 180, all right? We'll say the QB's here, running back is here, wide receiver is here, all right? Let's say these are the bets that you're looking at. These are the ones that have plus edge. You have your bets down, but these are the odds behind. How much should you be betting on these, okay? The mistake that a lot of people make is this right here. They see this, minus 200. Their unit size is not 200, but they'll go and put 200 down to make 100. Right here, they'll go 170 to make 100. And right here, they'll go 180 to make 100. That's not what you do, okay? That is not what you do. A lot of people make that mistake in the sports betting industry, and they try to match the odds. That's not what you do here, all right? You need to correlate what your unit size is. So if your bankroll is $10,000, you're only doing 1 to 3% of that, all right? So let's say you decide to do 3%, which is $300. That is where you're putting these plays in, all right, at that mark, each one of them, all right? It's not different unit sizes, all right? It's 300, 300, and 300. That's where you're placing those bets, okay? You're not matching the odds. The reason why you're not matching the odds is because when you have a higher odd, and let's just say that one loses, now you've disrupted the rest of the plays there, okay? That's not what you want to do. You'll get behind trying to bet that way. You don't need to bet that way. You need to bet your unit size, and you stick to it. It's that easy, depending on what it is. It has to be 1 to 3% of your bankroll. If you have these strategies down pat, and you know that literally what it's going to produce, yes, you could venture up to 5% for smaller bankrolls. You can, but you have to know what you're doing, because you can't afford to make mistakes when you're at 5% of your bankroll. But that is exactly how you correlate the strategy that I just showed you into money, okay? Because you could have the right strategy down, you could have the right plays, but if you don't know how to bet them the correct way, it's all meaningless. Now let's talk about what website you need to be able to find all that data for the highest DFS owned players across the lineups, all right? What you need to do is you need to go to the website called, this is the one that I use, okay? Roto Grinders, all right? Roto Grinders. That's what you need to go to, and then what you do is you literally just go to one tab. There's one tab under there, okay? For the NFL, go to Lineup, HQ, okay? And then you'd be able to see, it'll say percentage owned percent. And you'll be able to correlate your quarterback, your running back, your receiver, and see the highest that are owned across all the lineups on any given Sunday. Now, why does this strategy work? This strategy works because what we're doing is we're taking fantasy points, all right, and we're correlating them into real stats. That's all we're doing. We're taking fantasy points, correlating them into real stats for the position's dominant prop, okay? Because the quarterback obviously is passing, the running back would be running, and the receiver would be receiving yards. So that is all we're doing here. Like I said, it's a basic concept. You're taking fantasy points, you're correlating them into real stats, and then you're using that to determine your props to find your highest probability number within that prop.